Welcome to Rainbow Country. This isn't just a podcast, it's a record, a raw, untouchable archive of the truth of queer life in so-called Canada. I'm your host, Mr. Terry Westerby. I'm a trans man who grew up queer in a place that didn't know how to love all of who I was. Like many of us, I survived by shrinking. Because in so-called Canada, where its laws promise our freedom, but its systems still deny our care, and its people still deny our humanity, queer and trans people have never had permission to exist. And yet, we exist. But more than that, we endure. We love. We build joy and community in the space between the cracks of the system we've fallen into. We know that survival isn't the whole story. We deserve to be heard, fully, honestly, and without translation. These are our stories, told by people who have lived through silence, through shame, through control, and refused to disappear for anyone's comfort. These stories go deeper than a critical look at the system. They invite us to ask what it means to choose yourself in a world that insists it knows what's better for you than you do. Their stories show us what it means to truly be free in a country that promises freedom when everything about its laws and power structures say you actually aren't free at all. You'll hear joy, grief, transition, defiance, faith, fatigue, survival, and the fierce, quiet power of community. So wherever you are, remember this. This world, this country, this land, this life, it's yours. You don't need permission to be here. This is Rainbow Country. A note before we begin, the stories you'll hear are raw and real. Please take care of yourself as you listen. Step away if you need. Your safety matters more than finishing an episode. These are the voices that have lived through silence and shame and refuse to disappear, and I'm here to honor them. Let's begin. On today's episode, I speak with the author of The Blue Hour Gospel, Colin Belcourt. Colin grew up in small-town Ontario and later lived in large cities like Ottawa, carrying the experience of being queer in a time before the internet made language, community, or reflection easy to find. From a young age, he learned that his feelings were something to hide, especially in relation to family, faith, and masculinity. The Blue Hour Gospel isn't a self-help book or a tidy coming-out story. Colin wrote it as a fragmented memoir, pushing back against one-size-fits-all ideals of healing, success, and becoming. The book asks what happens when we stop trying to erase our differences or optimize ourselves into something more acceptable, and instead learn how to listen to ourselves and to each other. This conversation is about growing up in the in-between, resisting stereotypes and choosing visibility in a country that often says it's inclusive without building real space for people to live whole lives. If you've ever felt out of step with the timelines or stories you were handed, this episode is for you.
I would say that it's like two weeks, 2.5 weeks until this bad boy of a book comes out. So I am sitting with anxiety, I'm sitting with nerves, I'm sitting with a whole lot of stuff, especially because, so this is going to be the first time, I know this is going to sound crazy, but this is going to be the first time that my immediate family members are going to learn a lot of stuff about me. And I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Is this how it's gonna go? Is this gonna be okay? So I'm sitting with a lot. Then, like, okay, so yes, they all lived through obviously my life with me, and they know firsthand what it was like. But I don't think, like, we've never talked about, like, train of thought. Where was I mentally at the time? Why would I have possibly taken something this way compared to maybe if someone else had done it? Or even just those moments that we go through in queer life that even empathetic straight people, no matter how much they want to say, oh, yes, I understand, I empathize, I do this, it's very hard for them to understand what it's actually like or to know that it would be different for us in any context. So I think that those moments are going to be a huge question mark. And I think that that time, that space and time is going to be exactly what's needed because it will be a little bit of a brand new world, I think. So I was born in Newmarket, Ontario, which is about theoretically a 35-40 minute drive outside of Toronto. Traffic probably like 2 hours. So grew up there, spent I guess all the way up until college and university in Newmarket, which is at the time it was very small. Well, I want to say very small town. And then I look at where I am right now and I'm like, it wasn't small in the slightest. And I don't know why I ever thought it was. It was like, I think when I was younger there, it was like 60 to 65,000 people. And at that time I was like, this is where we live in the boondocks. Like, this is just so weird. And then now I live in a place where there's like 10,000 people. And I'm like, okay, no, this is the smaller time. And I could go smaller. Please, the way this world is going. But I grew up there when it was, yeah, a little bit smaller than it is now. Now it's basically just its own borough of North York and Toronto. And then, of course, with school in the later years, all the bigger schools are in the Toronto area. So it was a lot of transit back and forth, um, which just happened to coincide with my later teen and younger 20 years. So it was like, woo, Party Central, which was obviously the perfect place to be because if you know Ottawa, it definitely does not have much of a gay scene in the slightest. So it would have been a completely. I don't think this book would have existed if I had grown up here, probably per se, maybe. And then yeah, eventually it was just too much of that big city noise and the same hustle and bustle and people, and it was time to time to move somewhere quiet and nice and calm.
What made Newmarket feel like a small town?
I think it felt like small town, especially because the proximity to Toronto was so close that it was like, oh, okay. If it's not a big city like Toronto, it's small. You know what I mean? Like it's not, we're not connected to anything. There was like buses, but it's not like there was all these like different means of transportation, like subways and streetcars and buses and this and this and this. And then on the more social side of things, if Ottawa doesn't have queer scene, Newmarket in the years like back in the 90s definitely didn't have a scene. And even now, I would imagine it would be incredibly small. So I think those things all together in this little weird environment of me being shy and growing up, I was like, this is really small and cozy. This is small town.
When you were in your small town, did you feel like a lot of pressure to stay in the closet, or what was your experience like?
Now, that one was interesting because, like, especially back, and I'm gonna hate myself for saying this so much because when I'm like, whenever I say back then, I cringe in my head because I'm like, you're not even that old. This isn't like we're going back to like the 60s and the 50s. Like it's like literally the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's not that crazy, but it does feel like way back then, and there was no representation. Like there was zero people out in schools. So of course, like if you look at elementary school, it was something that is like a completely different topic that would never have been talked about. And if it was talked about, it would have been like, oh my God, you're different, get him. Um, as opposed to, oh, like this person's different. Let's see what's going on here. Or high school where it was like, again, Catholic high school, very, of course, Newmarket had other public high schools, but I grew up in the Catholic system. So it was, again, nothing talked about, nothing like there was no one else. I'm sure there was other people looking back. I'm sure there was a few that would have been at that school in different grades that were in the same position. But to me, it felt like, oh, you're the only one. And I think that coupled with the fact that I was so incredibly shy and introverted and just in my own head and way 95% of the times made it feel infinitely worse and will make a lot more sense to a lot of people when they read the book and they're like, oh, so maybe that's why you're like this now, or oh, maybe that's why we like approach these scenarios, because it did feel like an island of one a lot of the
Mm.
time.
So it wasn't like they talked about it negatively, like, oh, if you don't be gay, like gay is bad as sin. They just didn't talk about it at all. It was silence.
I would say it wasn't. So it was talked about negatively in like a peer sense. So other little kids, it's like, oh well, why are you playing with the girls? You're a boy. Like you are playing with them. Oh, you probably have a crush on the boys. Oh, you probably like that whole thing that the younger kids do, and it was like amplified back then because again there was no representation, so there was no one for that person to look to, or anyone else really, to say, hey, this is kind of what this person is acting like or looking like. Um, so on that aspect, yeah, like there was tons of bullying, especially throughout the younger years of elementary school. Then it kind of ebbed and flowed. And then, of course, the start of high school, when it's like every high school or every elementary school in a year, like certain radius, starts bleeding kids into the same school. And it's like all of a sudden you do get brought into so many different personalities and people who don't know you. Again, all of a sudden it's like, wait, why is this kid, why does he sound like this? Why does he act like this? Why doesn't he talk to any of the boys? Why does he just stay around the girls? So it picked up a little bit about then too, but I would say it was never, especially from an adult point of view or like a senior point of view, mentioned at all. Like, not even in a negative way. It was like, doesn't exist. And again, I don't necessarily equate that to people being homophobic per se or like uncomfortable with it. I think it literally was no one had any freaking clue who was, who wasn't, who could even look towards someone for some sort of feeling about that, because there was just no role models, I would have said. Like in my eyes, I'm like, there's no one around. There's no role models. So I think it was different. And of course, with it being the Catholic, it's like, it's just, you don't talk about it. Home was home was good. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, you just paused there. What's that about? And I'm like, it's not, it wasn't bad, but I've learned now, looking back, how lonely it was. So not being able to be myself, even though I did, when I didn't know that I wasn't being myself, like I just figured this is life, right? I look back on that and I'm like, wow, it was lonely. And then, especially aging, and so I have an older sister, so she came before me and everything and set the stage for me to be this little rebellious one. So I always had that in the back of my mind too, because I was like, well, I'm can't be like her, right? Like, she's the funny enough thing. She's got everything I want. Like, she can go talk to the boys. She can do this. She can have a boyfriend. She can go out and be like comfortable and not be teased all the time. But of course, me being younger and not being able to reconcile that in my head of, hey, you're actually missing this, it would just throw off the whole dynamic, right? Like, it would lead to relationship problems, it would lead to communication problems. And again, it was that common thread of aloneness, I think, that really changed how I interacted with my family. And I don't think they would, I mean, I'm guessing. I don't think any of them would say, "Oh, we didn't think you were being any different," or anything. But I think it is hindsight's 2020, right? Like, you look back and you think, I would have never acted any of these ways if I had just had something at that point. And I mean, who knows? Maybe if I did have something, it would have been the exact same, but it would have been different, and that's for sure.
You felt like you couldn't talk to them, but they didn't really give you a reason for that? It just, you were like, "I can't share this. I don't even know what to say." It just the you problem?
Yeah. And I mean, like, them, like, it's not like I understood maybe per se that there was like another adult who they knew that was kind of like that, or like queer or in the closet, or who had already come out. So it's not like there was a role model for anyone on like how to interact, which kind of sounds wild that you would need a role model to interact with someone. But I mean, for those people that did grow up knowing absolutely nothing about it, it's like they don't understand the differences that there are. So at the end of the day, they would need that. And of course, with like the kids at school and then the not seeing myself anywhere, it was very much like, okay, well, this is the little slice of the island that I do have right now. What happens if I say this out loud and then that goes away as well? Like, then I'm left with nothing and I'm really in the hole. So it was better to just hush until the last possible moment, when, of course, that moment is stolen from you in a lot of cases, and then deal with it then, because it's much easier to just status quo, especially those younger years, I find. Right? Don't make waves, try to go along, don't try to, which is funny because I'm like, although, did I try to get along? Probably not. It was. It was the best I could. So my mom always used to babysit this other family when before school had even started. And I was quite close with their son that was the same age as me, and we continued to be friends. I think it was until like mid elementary school because he went to a different school. And at that point, it's like, well, you've got your friends, you're in that school. I've got my friends, I'm in this school. You're not going to be as close. So that didn't really have anything to do with me being gay. It was just a natural progression of boundary lines of where we lived and where we went to school. But the majority of school was all girl, 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 girl up until about grade, I would say 5 or 6. And then it was at that point where kids are starting to learn the lines of, well, wait a second, like, shouldn't you be not with the boys, but like, why are you always with the girls? Why are you so? And then, of course, the girls are starting to go through things and they're like, well, we just want to be on our own. So I ended up becoming friends with a few of the more quiet guys for about a time. And then that ended quite poorly because obviously, again, it was like, well, we think you're gay and gay is bad and this is this. So I remember for a good period of time, I didn't really have any friends. I would pretend that I would have friends just to make it easier. And of course, you don't want to be that disappointment to your family or to anyone on the outside looking in. And again, you don't want to make those waves. So it's like, oh, yeah, of course I'm fine. I've got this. And eventually it did turn back. So, like, grade when, of course, everyone knows, oh, high school's coming. We're all going to be mixed up anyways. Let's just live and let live. It got comfortable again, but it would definitely fall right back into the lines of I would be more comfortable with the females than the males because, I mean, the males were like, let's talk about hockey. Let's talk about this. Let's just all jump and roughhouse each other. And I'd be like, no, can we not? This sounds like worse. This is the worst thing ever. Can we just sit around and talk? Probably not the best role model. First up, as always, my voice is people are like, why do you sound like that? Why do you talk like that? And I would say, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm like on the super feminine side. I'm definitely more feminine than a fair amount of gay people. So I feel like that always as well was like oh, okay, so you're playing with the girls, but also like, they'd be like, why are you acting like one? Why are you more like this? I think there was a little bit of that, but again, at least in elementary school, it was never a words until that one group of boys. And then it was like, okay, there's a name for this. And apparently it brings all these horrible things and no one will come near you. And all of a sudden you've become a pariah and you can kiss goodbye any social interaction. And then, yeah, it changes drastically after
Mm.
that point. Especially if you look at the teachers back then. Like, I could say, yes, okay, they mean well. But it's like, when there's those older people who you're supposed to look up to and they're coming up to you being like, you really should be like, why don't you go try doing this? Why don't you go try fitting in this way? And it's like, even if you're not sitting there taking what they say as verbatim and being like, oh my God, yes, now I'm going to go butch it up and I'm going to go play hockey, it still is adding up in your brain over and over and over again. You are not enough. You are not enough. You are not enough. You are not fitting in. And I think that that too makes this dissonance in how you're showing up socially and how you are interacting because you have it in the back of your head that there's these eyes on you policing what you do, making sure that you're acting how you're supposed to be acting, but you're not acting that way, but you're trying to act that way while trying to also act like you enjoy X, Y, and Z, and it's a lost cause from the get go. I know you love that, but it's like a murder board. It really is. All of a sudden, it turns into the red string across everything, and you're looking for connections in the tiniest ways just to fly under the radar a little bit more. And then, of course, you end up crashing and burning because you're focused on so many things at once that you don't even realize that you've just tangled yourself up in the yard and fallen over and you're not getting back up.
I love that. A very, very powerful visual analogy of what it's like trying to, dance to someone else's music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you grew up, like I know for myself, it took me a while to realize for myself, but people were still saying things about me like you're gay or that and whatever before I realized it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
was that like that for you?
Um, I don't think so. Like, if I think back onto the earliest years, I would say, if anything, I got picked on more for being quiet or just awkward in general because I was just not even thinking about, like, because this would be back in what, grade one, two, three. Again, if you're looking at the kids, like the other little boys that are being loud and boisterous and energetic, or even some of the girls that are a lot more social and a lot more floating in and out of these different groups, and you have the one person that's quiet, that one person is going to be ostracized for being quiet. And when meanwhile, it's like you're just perpetuating the same circle because now that person's really going to be quiet and then you're going to keep picking on them. So I think for a lot of the time it was that. Now, I do think that as the years went on, it did morph into that. So it was the natural progression of, wait a minute, he's not just quiet, he's gay. And then that takes on its own legs and starts running. So I think it is a natural progression of a pipeline, as you would, of like quiet, shy to feminine queer. And even though people don't have the words for it or oh, that was going to sound mean. I was going to say the brain power. They pick up on someone being different and they're like, wait a second, who are you? I'm going to hone in on this and I'm going to treat you like you're this complete one-eyed monster. So
That sounds really tough. When did you start noticing for yourself that you were attracted to men?
funny enough, in a weird way, it was right around that time I started to be friends with that guy group because up until that point, right, I had been friends with only the females. And it was like, okay, I mean, no one's talking about boys, no one's talking about, like, everyone's just talking about Spice Girls, really, at this point, because that was the huge thing. Spice Girls, Backstreet Boys. It was like, cool. There's like Spice Girl cards. Let's collect those. Let's talk about those. Let's talk about Baby Spice. Like, it was never anything hugely glaring. And then you end up being friends with boys in, say, like grade seven. Of course, right around when like computers and the internet are really starting to build up. And it's like, hey, do you know that you can go find like pictures of men and women in sexual positions and stuff? And of course, me being so like naive was like, huh? Like what? So they're like, yeah, you should check out this thing. It's like, trust me, the girls, like, they're so hot, yada yada. And it was like, cool, okay. Go home, do it, of course, not knowing what a history function is. Looking, and the whole time I'm sitting there like, well, this isn't that interesting. But then I'm looking at the men in it, and I'm like, why am I being drawn to them instead? And I think that started the conversations in my own head of, wait a second, no one else has mentioned this. Why am I the one that's like zooming in on the guys here and not picking up on the girls? So I think that started the balancing act of showing up and having to really start doing that the opposite way. But of course, again, it's these boys are like, they want to do more, right? They want to know more. They want to explore more. They're looking for this. And while they're all exploring and learning about themselves in this way, I'm completely in left field, realizing all these like life-changing things about me that I can't talk with anyone. So I couldn't even bond or like connect with anyone on an even human level. And then of course, no doubt, they also got busted by their parents and probably said, what the hell? Like, why are you looking at this? But like when I got busted, it was even worse because it was like, oh my God, they can't find out. Like, they can't find out that I'm looking at like the men, right? They can't find I'm doing like this. And at the same time, growing up in a place where there is no representation, there's no one out there like that gives you anything to look for. You start to look at like that material, like the porn per se, more because you're like, well, this is the only place I can like see this and I can get this, right? And this is the only thing that I'm starting to make sense with. So I think from theirs, and I'm going down a rabbit hole right now, but I'm like, in their mind, it was like, oh my God, probably like my kid's addicted to porn. What the hell? Why is he looking at all these things all the time? And it's like, I probably thought that as well, but I didn't know that I was just so desperate for any part of like small reference or frame of like who any of these people were that I could probably be like, oh my God, that's me. You know what I mean? I mean, looking in the wrong places. Now I'm looking back, I'm like, do I want to? But it was completely different. It was a completely different scenario, and they would never understand that because to them, men and women, right, everywhere in the world, it's not like they ever had a shortage of who they were looking for because that's just how the world was built. Whereas in no one was making content or reaching out to someone who was different like this and gay. So it was like, let me sink my claws in.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I know that's probably really deeply personal. It's scary to share those things, but it's important for people to understand like how much lack of representation actually puts youth in much more dangerous and vulnerable positions. Like you said, you didn't like a straight kid may
Mhm.
be caught by his parents and then have an opportunity for conversation, but a queer kid who's terrified of being caught and then also not given the opportunity for conversation, that's just putting them in such a vulnerable place. So I really appreciate you sharing that because that is a great example of what happens.
It is. And you say opening up the door for other things. I don't want to say predators because, again, I'm like, I feel like that word gets used a lot in wrong context, but it opened the door for a lot of damaged people who didn't have any of the same things, who had already damaged themselves beyond belief, to then keep passing that along. So it does. Like there's so many multi-layered things that it just cascades and waterfalls down to where if there was some sort of conversation or if there was some sort of availability around information, which don't even get me. So back I'm thinking to myself, remember those old phone books, the yellow, well, not the yellow pages, but like those big heavy ones. And you would like look into it. And of course you would see like gay helpline or whatever, and I remember thinking a few times, like, I want to call that so bad. But I'm like, what if it shows up on the phone bill? What if it shows up on the phone? What if it shows up on this? So it's not even like most people would have access to that sort of thing. And if they did, it probably would have been a very desperate situation that they just outweighed completely being caught. So for me, it was like,
Mm.
yay, boobs and women. Oh my God, I love this. So, interestingly enough, I never thought it was wrong. I never felt it was wrong from the get go. I thought it just made sense in my head. All of a sudden, it was like, okay, clicked. Yeah, makes sense. However, at the same time, you see no one else is talking about it. No one else is saying these type of things. So it's not a safe place anywhere to talk about these things. So it wasn't like that there was an immediate danger or an immediate negative connotation about it. It was definitely a, okay, I'm this. I understand it. I understand it, actually, I should say, because, I mean, who understands it back then? But I'm not going to talk about it at all.
So it's
Self
just a big
preservation.
secret.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how many years did you keep that secret?
So that would have been around, yeah, grade 6, 7. So then I was finally outed in grade 11 or 12. I can't remember, to be perfectly honest. I feel like I am getting to that age where I'm like, what year was this? Someone said to me the other day too, they're like, did you know you graduated in like 2006? And I was like, huh? I thought it was like way longer in the past. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? Are you sure? Um, but yeah, no, I think it was like start of or end of grade 11 or ish around that time that it happened. So a fair amount of years to sit with yourself in your own head and not like look for yourself everywhere or any small chance of seeing recognition in someone else's face and not.
And editing yourself in every room.
Editing. And that's a huge. So, one of the big topics of my book, which of course is from the context of romanticism, especially in that regard, but I didn't even realize at the time, like self erasure wise, we were learning how to like get rid of ourselves way back. Like that was just the primer for all these other times. And I always thought, okay, this didn't start until the dating scene. And then it was like those specific teen, like oh, I feel so, I'm not this, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not hot enough, I'm not this, I'm not. But it is true. Like it started way before that in how you show up in social situations, how you show up at school, how you show up to your family. Like you get so good at taking out bits of yourself just so you can fly under the radar that you begin to forget that there isn't even a radar there looking for you, and you're just like, okay, this is who I am now.
You start to police yourself even.
Hmm.
So you said you were outed in grade 11.
I was. So I actually had this one group of girlfriends, and we had all grown quite close because we were the outcasts, or we weren't like the most social showing up. And one of them had a friend who was a little bit older than us. She didn't go to our school, but she lived on our street, so they knew each other. And she started inviting her to hang out with us and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this girl is so cool. Like, she's just so carefree. She gives zero shits. Like, please, I want to be like her so bad. And eventually, like, we got more and more comfortable. And I ended up telling her. And she said, like, do the other people know? And I said, no, not at all. And she ended up convincing me to tell them because she was like, well, I mean, like, if you trust me and we're all the exact same in this group, like, and we had talked about it a fair bit, and I thought, okay, you know what, yes, I will tell just the immediate people. So I told them all, and things were going fine. But then one day that girl that was not in our school called me and said, so you know that so and so is going around telling everyone right now because it's like the big gossip, the big thing. And it was like, it was literally on a Sunday that she called me, and I was like, I have to go into school tomorrow. I literally have to go into school tomorrow where everyone knows this about me now. Because, of course, something like that, so salacious, travels like wildfire. And I'm like, so that is there. My sister goes to this school. So, of course, who knows if she's going to get wind of this, which that was a whole other thing. And I was like, and I can't, who am I supposed to talk to about this right now? Like, I can't, I'm not out to my family. I'm not out to my parents. So I'm not going to be like, oh my God, this is a huge thing. Like, I'm so scared. And yeah, so on a Sunday, like evening, literally hours before I was going to go to bed, it was like, surprise, by the way, she's been telling everyone. And it was like,
Wow.
fuck.
And I'm curious, did this happen because there was a rift? Like, was she doing this as vengeance? So, like, I use
um,
that with air quotes.
no, she eventually down the line, like, we stopped being friends immediately. And I was actually shocked about the whole thing because somehow, in some weird Uno reverse universe card, people rallied around me for it. Like all the people, not all the people, there was still a huge group of people that it was like, ew, no, you're gonna take pictures of us, you're gonna like us in the change room, and it's like, yes, clearly. That is obviously what I want to do right now. But a huge portion of people ended up rallying around me and like not taking my side, but being like, oh my God, like that's insane that this just happened to you. Like, there's no need to be nervous. There's no need to this. There's no need to this. And so she got upset and started going like, oh, well, I'm on antidepressants now because everyone's so mean to like, and she tried to spin it to make this whole thing. Anyways, we eventually, years and years and years and years and years later, ran into each other at this social gathering. And I had heard from other people before then too about how it was never this like malice. And a lot of them had said, oh, it was, I don't want to say jealousy. It was almost more of like she saw you being comfortable and felt like maybe she wasn't comfortable, so she wanted to have a moment where she was in the spotlight, and this was her way of doing it without thinking things through all the way. And yeah, when we had talked later on, she had alluded to it not being like a ooh salacious, this is so evil, but a feeling of power in that moment, right? Like ooh, I know something. I'm an outsider. This might get me a little bit of social currency. Let's see what happens. Let's roll the dice.
Mm.
And then I think a good healthy dose as well as not reading the room correctly. Like thinking, people will be fine with this. Like, what are you talking about? If I'm fine with this, everyone will be fine with this. There's no danger to this human being. If anything, I'm helping that person. So I think there's always that little like nittering point in people's head who do that, who are like, I'm doing them a favor. And it's like, no, no, you're not. But it was interesting to think about it and see it from that perspective. Because of course at the time when you're going through it, you're like, death, this person hates me. This person clearly just like wished death upon me because now what am I gonna do? The sky is falling.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you've not carried any like hard feelings against her.
I have not. And it was weird because I definitely, like I said, I did for a while. It was very much like this person is horrible. And I feel like if it did go much different for me, like, and I had received such horrible backlash or had been like picked on even more, bullied, physically assaulted, any of those things, I definitely would not have been able to let go of it. But since it did have a fairly positive outcome, it was like, okay, it is what it is. You know what I mean? And I did have the support of like my close people that it did help ease that a little bit. And I mean, it didn't hurt that that's around the time that it's like a potential boyfriend. Now I have this open for me. So I think it was a good melting pot of things that helped it, but it did take some time to not carry it with me. So I can't imagine. And that's when I'm like, people don't understand. I don't understand to a certain extent when people come out, like, because I feel partially blessed for how mine happened, right? Like, because it was so positive. I don't know what it's like to carry around that for so long of a bad one. So I could never just assume that, or I can empathize as much as I can, but at the end of the day, it's just not in my toolbox. I would say I would never go out of my way to be like, oh, this is info on coming out, like, should you think about this? Because I'm like, there's people's coming outs are wild. Okay, it's a wild west, and I will count my lucky stars that mine went the way it did.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that perspective because it is totally different for everyone and their situations at home or their safety
Mm-hmm.
situations, their financial situation. All that is a factor in coming out. So I'm glad that it turned out okay and that you were safe at school and that you seems like you started flourishing at that point.
A soft flourish, a flourish in the okay. I don't have to hide everything.
Right. And so did it end up coming home then? Like, did your sister find out and it end up affecting your home life?
So I never know if she had found out or if she had heard something or what had happened. I think, and this is going to sound incredibly horrible of myself because I know it's so hard for a lot of people to do, but I think because of how okay it was and how open people were, it was almost like, okay, well, this is the last hurdle to do, and then I can just be myself completely. So it was like, let me just do this. Where I know, again, it's not the case for a lot of people when it's like, oh, but it's still their family, and that carries a whole different weight to it and a whole different perspective. And I could be off my rocker, not even remembering it correctly, because I do feel like there was a lot of blurriness in and out of those times because of all the things happening in teen hormones and stuff and other things I was going through. But it had ended up coming about because I was in counseling for depression at the time because, of course, like every teen, I had horrible acne. And my doctor ended up putting me on the popular one at the time is I think it was Accutane, and it was like, this is phenomenal. However, it will most likely make you want to kill yourself. And there was a really popular case at the time of a very well-to-do person, and their son actually ended up killing himself when he was on it. So I had started experiencing very heavy depression through it. So I had been going to that, and through talking with the person, I think it just made natural sense in my head to one day bring it up to my mom and dad and be like, hey, by the way, I mean, in the way I did it, I was like, do we not have anyone gay in the family? And it was like, no, why? Well, am I adopted then? Because like I am. And it was like, like a different thing. And I'm sure they remember it vastly different. And if you ask them, they'd be like, no, it didn't happen like that. Because of course, in their perception, it carries so much more different weight. But for me, it was a little bit more of an off the cuff moment because I think it was just naturally catching up with everything else that had happened beforehand.
That makes sense. Like you, all the fear, all the things that you were carrying, you just kind of got rid of them, and then it just kind of came out organically.
Yeah, and I do think having that, like, already growing up and feeling so very much alone, and then dealing with depression where your feelings of, like, say, despair and being by yourself even when you're not are amped all the way to like a 10 on the dial. It's like a lifeline, right? Like, let me tell this person this little bit about me because I'm hoping that they could pull me out of it. And I think it's weighing that option. And when you do have those moments of, I could end it right now, it does scare you. And like, at least it scared the shit out of me when it happened. And it was like, okay, let me just, like I said, one doesn't matter what the lifeline is, I'm going to throw it. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But like, I need a shot at the moment. So I feel like that was the best thing I could do, was to do an off the cuff comedy hour. Am I adapted?
It's a really good example of like how difficult it can be to find the right moment to come out, and what that ultimately, how it completely changes the rest of your life.
Hmm. And I couldn't imagine doing it nowadays because one of my friends, her daughter is in high school, and she was telling me this the other, like a little while back, and she asked them, so do people come out like this? And the daughter was like, Mom, no, no one cares about that. And was like, everyone just assumes that yada, 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 like no one cares. And I was like, is that genuinely how it is? Or is this just the one school? Like, obviously, I don't want to say the States is probably way different than that. But I was like, how amazing, but how weird and different for anyone that's doing that now in the schooling system, because it's just like these people, these kids are like coming out and saying something like huge and grand about themselves, and then what they're being met with, like, it's just this weird juxtaposition of like that pendulum swing all the way to the right. So I don't know if that's true. I don't know, I won't claim it's true, but I was like, when I heard that, it definitely made me stop and think how different life is for a whole lot of people now.
Right? If everyone could just know that everyone has the possibility of being bisexual, gay, whatever, and being open to that possibility and letting people just become who they are and not having that to be a moment,
I know.
amazing.
That would be lovely. It would take like so much pressure off people.
Yeah, because there's not no one moment where you just decide who you are. You just become.
Exactly. You do. You become, you find out. Like, and even me saying way back when, it just clicked in my head and made sense. Again, I know I'm lucky that it did just make sense like that. Like, there's a lot of people that struggle with that confusion and the push and pull tug of war of, oh my God, am I this? I can't be this. Am I that? Oh no, I can never be that. And I just don't recall that. So again, crossing my T's, dotting my I's. I don't know what deal I signed somewhere in life to get through it. Theoretically, this that easy, but it would be different these days. I think it would be vastly different.
Yeah, it just goes to show just how much we as a queer community share how our experiences are, for us to feel lucky enough to know that we get to know who we are, to like feel
Mhm.
lucky to get to have that experience is, I think, again, just an important perspective to share, because how many people do struggle, and then you get to know that you feel lucky, like instead of feeling only negativity, you get to feel positivity out of your experience. So that's
Mhm.
nice.
Now, I will say with social media, it's like no wonder these kids just don't bother coming out, because where are they going to hide? Everyone knows everything about everyone, about every, like, and there is zero way that people go. So I'm not surprised, I would say, but at the same time, I'm like, that would be social media and coming out, I feel like would petrify me. If I had that when I was a kid, I would probably be petrified.
Mm, that's a good point. So when you did come out to your family, how did that change? Like, did that change anything, or?
It didn't, I wouldn't say it didn't change in the classic sense. Like, it didn't change in the, this person has just said that they're gay, I'm treating them differently now. And it was never a treated difference. I think, if anything, it changed things in the aspect of, it started to free me up to go through other things. which changed the dynamic because there was a lot of acting out. There was a lot of partying. There was a lot of like late nights. There was a lot of internet and men and stuff. So I feel like that ended up getting quite difficult and changed things, I think, in the family dynamic. But it never was one of those things where it changed how we acted or how we showed up as a family, at least from my perspective. I mean, they could say, oh, it did make us stop and think, but I don't think it did. And even looking back, I don't think, like, there's comments here or there, but I know what they said and it might shock people, but like, because of course it's burned. When you have that conversation, it's like one of those light bulb, flash bulb memories where it's burned into your head for like now until whenever. But I know my mom, bless her heart, no one come, said, I'm just worried that your life is going to be harder now and that makes me sad. And then I remember thinking, uh-oh, uh-oh. And then my dad at the time had said, I don't want you to ever use this against us. And he meant it in a way of if I was disciplined or if I did something that, wasn't great and I had to receive some form of like punishment or grounding or whatever grand thing you can think of when you're a teenager, that it's because of your this. Like he didn't want me to think that way. But I remember at the time both of those things kind of throwing me off a little bit, but not to the extent where there was such a huge thing. And I mean, looking back again, I'm like, for people that had no frame of reference, as far as I'm aware, they knew no one, they had nothing to look to on how to handle it, how to act, or even how to show up. I think they did a perfectly fine job knowing what they had grown up like. So
So you started, would you say like you started to change just because you're a teenager coming into adulthood and you getting to live yourself like truly as yourself for the first time and you started becoming interested in different things?
Yes and no. So I don't think it was like, oh my God, now I'm free. I can like be this. I think it was more of life in general started to expand. Like, so the internet was definitely much bigger, like throwback to MySpace, MSN Messenger. The first like flip phones and cell phones were coming out. So that was interesting. But it was like a weird, high schools were starting to like intermingle with other high schools. So it was like, oh, you got to, this is going to sound so bad, but it's like, oh, you get to see the public school kids. Like we were just these like little prim and proper, now I know what it's like to be in this town, like this student. So I think it was that was more opening the horizons, well, at the same time being like, again, where is like where are my guidelines? Who do I look to? There is zero for me. And of course there was like queer as folk. Of course there was I'm trying to think of popular like celebrity activists at the time that were like that. But like sheltered me, I wouldn't have known. It wasn't until my first boyfriend that he showed me queer as folk and I was like, this exists? And then when I was watching it, I was just like, so we're supposed to just have sex with strangers like all the time? Like this wouldn't have been the best frame of reference for anyone. But yeah, so it was this weird mix of exciting what could be while also still the tentativeness of what could be. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like my friends, they all get to bond and be like, oh, this is what happens when you get a boyfriend, and this is like what this is where you go, and this is what you do, and it's like, okay, but what do I do? Where does this difference?
Right. Because, yeah, being a boyfriend as a girl is different than being a boyfriend as a boy. Like, I don't think people realize the differences in, because people are like, if you like boys, then you must act like a girl. But no, like your gender and your sexuality, they are related, but they're completely separate and they're different. So I just don't
Hmm.
think people really understand that.
They don't. And even the access, it's like, okay, so they could get a boyfriend at their first job. They could get a boyfriend at school. They could get a boyfriend in social clubs. Like, because your ease of access to straight like people is way higher than people who are hiding it. So for someone like me, it was like my access is I can only get any sort of like attention from, say, people in chat rooms, older men in chat rooms, or just older men in general, because of course they're the ones that are like again, not to use the, I don't want to use the word predatory, but they're a little bit more aggressive in how they show up and how they get out there, right? Um, so that, even that alone changes how people see relationships because, of course, they, again, who have picked their boyfriend from all these little social places, get to grow up feeling a certain way represented in a relationship where us, like me in particular, with the older men or people only looking for like sex or one thing is like, okay, that's my worth. You know what I mean? And if I'm not showing up in a way that gets me that worth, then again, I'm not showing up at all. I'm taking that eraser back to myself, and I may as well just throw myself off completely because now I've learned that this is where I can get it. And if I'm not willing to do what it takes to get it, then I guess that's what it is. That's life.
Right. So as you entered this early 2000s gay community in Ontario, you found that community still asked you to change who you were to fit into that space.
Yeah. And I think even like as things evolved and more serious relationships started, I think because of all those past interactions and not having anyone around to connect with, I bring a very healthy dose of attachment disorders of like, oh my God, if I'm not super lovable, there goes that, and I'm going to be alone again, and I'm going to go right back to how I was being before. So, like, let me go out and drink more. Let me go out and do this. Let me show up in like this aspect of life, because if I don't, it's going to go away. I may as well kiss it goodbye. It just leaves a different way that you sit with yourself at the end of the day, I would say, because there's no space for kindness, there's no space for empathy and allowing yourself to feel. It's like, what does that other person want? What do I have to do to get that? And then once I've got it, how long do I have this for? Because I can't let it go again.
Yeah, I feel that. I have very anxious attachment style and slightly avoidance as well. So I totally know. I know exactly how you feel, but I relate to what you're sharing a lot.
And it shows up for us like the funny thing is too, people are like, oh, like interesting, but I'm like, I don't think they realize how much that influences things outside of our like romantic life, even like if you look at professional life or just social, it's like how we interact with people around us, like our peers, our seniors, even youth, is to a certain extent now, at least in my mind, driven by this extreme terror of if I don't show up in the correct way at the correct time, that's going to go away. And while I'm incredibly introverted now, and I'm like, oh, I would like the peace and quiet, I still don't want it to go away. And I still don't want to be ostracized because I know what that's like. I don't want to go back there. So I'm going to keep showing up in the same patterns. And it's very hard to break said patterns. But I really, and that's always going to be my one huge, well, not one huge, because I have like three huge points that I always make about queer life in general, but that is just always one is we don't know how much we've let those things affect us and guide us until we are now in these later relationships and we are still doing the exact same things that we did 20 years ago.
Preach. Something tells me that this leads directly into why you wrote your book.
It does because, and I will always shout out this one. Well, I won't say them by name just because I don't want to embarrass them, but I had the pleasure of having one very good therapist encourage me to, because he was always like, you're very observant, which I was like, is because I'm gay, because I'm so used to hyper scanning rooms and like surroundings to make sure. But he's like, you're very observant with yourself and like willing to notice when you're doing something, notice your patterns, notice why you're behaving a certain type of way. So he would give me different exercises to work on and stuff. And one time he said, have you ever tried journaling? And I was like, journaling? Ew. Why would I? Not for me. And he was like, I don't know. And so we ping ponged back and forth for a while. And then eventually, after he had introduced me to a few other activities that I reluctantly decided to try, I was like, maybe he does know what he's talking about. So I was like, let me do this. Let me try this. And I sat and it just started flowing. And as it started flowing, and I thought, maybe let me share this with a few people from different walks of queer life that I think would have had different experiences than me by either how they've been raised or later on in life. And let's see how this resonates with them. And every single one of them, for some reason, even when I tried to pick people that would like ruin me and tear me down, they were like, I feel this. Like, I feel this. And I've never actually like sat down and thought about it. So then in my delusional head, I was like, well, you know what that means? That means that there's a whole lot of people out there that feel the exact same way as us who aren't talking about it. And I think it's time to start pushing that needle for that conversation in the correct direction. And I was like, and I will do it because I am clearly a literary genius who has never written a book before and who never did very good in English class. But you know what? This is for me. This is my calling, and that's how she was born.
Oh, it's a beautiful birthing story.
I was gonna say she was
So,
an easy birth.
but it doesn't sound to me like your intention was to like become an author or to like start a series or to be known. It sounds to me like you were much like this podcast. Your motivation is to share your story and connect with other people, especially queer Canadians, millennials, who
Mm-hmm.
have experienced this and who have just been quiet about it because we feel alone, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And seeing how all these people, myself included, how we show up in, like, again, professional settings or on LinkedIn, and seeing these behaviors still leading us down the exact same paths that we were on, I was like, is anyone, like, not is anyone going to say it, but like, we are partially to blame for everything that's coming about for like our youth, or not youth, but like our younger generation growing up queer being like, oh, I don't feel good about my body, or oh, I don't feel like this part of the community supports me. Because none of us have taken the time to stop. Well, a few of us, obviously, way more people than me. Like, let's be honest. Again, I'm just this little blip in the ocean. Have stopped and said, why are we still doing these things? Why are we still allowing ourselves to be portrayed in certain ways? Why are we still repeating the same behaviors that got us into scenarios that we didn't care for the outcome in the end? And it was like, if I can just get this on paper and get it out there, then you know what? Maybe at the end of the day, one person will read it and be like, that's a different way of thinking about it, like change my perspective, and then that person will do something, and then that person, and like even just reaching one person out there who starts to notice things more and wants to make a change for the positive. I think that was the thing that was like, we need this, we need to do better as a group when we're being attacked by so many people out there. It's like we should be supporting ourselves more. And I will also say, like, I did do a fair amount of time in DEI work in the corporate space. And I was like, listen, I am, by all accounts, like, I'm a white male. I know the privilege that I carry and a lot of things. At the same time, I don't think people realize what privilege I don't carry the minute I open my mouth and people hear me, and all of a sudden it's like, whoop, so I was like, if I am to be representing this group at the top of this social structure that gets everything, and I'm being treated this way and showing up how like I've been conditioned to show up, then think about everyone else who does have it worse. Think about the people who don't even get the same opportunities that I do. Like, how are we not supporting those people better? Because I mean, again, I can sit here and talk about, well, it ended up going so well for me. I'm so blessed that I had this like experience and this story, even though it was like scary and tough. But like, that's not the reality for a whole lot of people. And I think it's time that we start changing the camera direction and start working in house to fix all of the inequalities and the horrible things that we will do to each other and use those to grow. At least that would be my dream.
Yeah, I love that. We're the generation that we're now hitting 40s and we're the adults in the room and we're the largest demographic of adults. Like the older generations have started to retire and whatnot. So we are the only ones who are here to help us, right? If it's not us, then who? I love that.
What are you talking about? I'm only 29. I'm not even remotely close to my 40s. No, just kidding. I'll be 38 by the end of the month, which feels wild. But like you say, if not
Yeah.
us, then who? Like if I look right now, if I was literally to open up, which I did earlier, open up my LinkedIn, and I saw in one of these professionals groups, there's like people sharing pictures of themselves with like less clothes and being like, oh, this is confidence. This is what confidence looks like in life. And I'm like, in this age of social media, do you know how many young people are logging on and seeing this and being like not only do I have to show up professionally, but now I also have to show up visually in this professional setting where it's like we allow people to fetishize us, we allow people to class us as only having specific bodies, we allow people to basically dictate how we are until we start doing those same policing rules in the community, and it's hurting everyone. So I'm like, no, we got to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that your book is the antithesis of self-help.
Yes, because that was the other thing. I'm very, very, very cognizant of like, I don't hold medical degrees. I don't hold like social studies degrees. I'm not this person that's like, oh, look at how I've been accomplished in the academic space. You should listen to my advice. It is more of a let's get real. Let's sit down, roll up our sleeves, and let's actually start talking about things because we can sit and we can do pretty words all day. We can sit and listen to the next wellness person say, don't give a fuck, just do what you want. At the end of the day, it's not going to fix it. Until we start naming things and until we like get comfortable talking about those rough, raw moments with each other, it's just going to keep that revolving door is going to go around and around and around and around and around. So it was like, this is not going to be a self help. This is, in fact, a lot of people I think who read it will get to section 3 and say, what is he on? Because it gets a little like, I'm like, come on, I need you to loosen up a little bit with your time and like spacing and stuff. But it was like, just let's put a light on, let's put a spotlight on the differences and let's start celebrating said differences instead of dropping them into some AI filter trash and being like, this is who we are. Don't you love us?
So would you say that your book is like a personal view and stories supporting accepting us ourselves for who we are and all the differences and then being able to celebrate them in each other?
I think so. And I think a lot of it too is taking, so I did try to take some different, I want to say tone creative liberties. Like each chapter is told in a different medium. So like one is a QR code that leads to a playlist that mirrors the whole entire story, told through like queer artists. One is pictures. One could be told in a recipe blog. One is this because I wanted to highlight that like for a lot of us our world and how we interpret things and how we get information is very piecemeal. Like it's never the one binary way. We are all used to having to go outside and pull bits and pieces of us from different mediums, so I wanted to honor that because I thought that that was quite special in a way because it does make us so different. But like you say, I wanted to get that point across of like there are differences. That's the thing. I know we all want to try to fit in, and I know it's super scary to stand out on your own, but like it's trying to be too similar that damages the community in the end because then we allow ourselves to be boxed in to a role that none of us asked for, none of us fought for, none of us like actively tried to do, and we don't allow ourselves to be ourselves. So it's through like being open to yourself and to your own thoughts and just to the way the world works that you're going to get there. And I think I would like to say that that's what I tried to do, but then at the same time, I'm like, who knows? Maybe again, it was just a really good therapy session.
So I don't know if you're comfortable delving into this topic, but you went to Catholic school and growing up there. So I'm curious, like, what is your faith and how has this affected it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't believe in a higher power, or I don't believe in, like, I'm definitely not Catholic. And even growing up Catholic, we were more of the Christmas time Catholics, like the let's go to church on maybe the odd Sunday, maybe we'll go at like the big holidays, but it was never like hardcore practicing, you have to do this, which I'm grateful for. But I never had, since I never really identified as any of that, I didn't have any huge, I guess you could say, awakening or devolution of religion. I think if anything, I've come to over time respect like the energy and the body's direction to lead you, because as comfortable as it is to rely on there's a higher power keeping me safe and guiding me, this the shell is guiding me, and if the shell doesn't want me to get to that next stage, best believe it's going to drop me where I stand. But I started believing more in that, in the energy of the body and how we heal or how we hold on to things, and notice those type of undercurrents versus religion. Especially because, like, if you look at the religions, they all have such similar through lines, right? Where, of course, you can change it, you can alter it here or there, you can erase it, but a lot of them end up relying on the same thing. And I think to do that is to boil down the people into one archetype again. And just in our community, that's impossible. I know people want to do it and people want to box us in, but it's impossible. So I would rather believe in the cosmic energy of the moon than that, which would also explain why I'm highly anxious a lot of the time around full moons.
Yeah, for myself, I found the same thing. Like I was so disconnected from my body, and what my body was telling me, because I was just so focused on what was going on around me for safety, that like I'm only now, as a not nearly 40-year-old, starting to realize like the importance of listening to my body and what is my body telling me, and slow down so I could hear it and respect it and live in alignment with it. Because otherwise, your body literally feels like it's being dragged behind a truck if you're not.
It does. And I think feeling that also with section 3 of the book being more about not religion, but like a different cosmic perception of how you look at things. It was very much like growing up in a religious school. It wasn't severe by any type, but it definitely helped with looking at any organized religion, any religion at all, that was like, who is the religion serving though? Who is the ones at the top of the chain that are benefiting from these things? Who are the ones that are being left out of it? And that also tied into it. So you get all that on your body being dragged from the back of the wagon. And it's like, this can't be it.
Right, trying to hold so much. So I know you've written this book. It's coming out in February, and you're experiencing this, and it's about a personal experience. But that doesn't mean that the story for you is over. That your journey is done. That you've reached enlightenment. Hallelujah. So what is life like for you now?
I was like right at this exact moment, a crackpot. Like it's like a redacted file being shared, and you're like, what is this? Life, though, I think it's going to take it interesting, because I really have learned that I want to sink my little claws into this and push it as far as it can go. And I think a huge section of our community that does not get any remote attention or feelings or being able to process what they went through is the older generations, because like you're not young, you get aged out so fast. Like we joke about the 40s, and it's like, I'm trying to think. I was, again, bless me that I was a twink at some point. So I was living the Vida Loca, and then I experienced twink death and was like, what? What is this? There's life beyond. But jokes aside, I'm like, there's so many life happenings that happen after this be it all twink life, that it's like, can we start focusing more on that? And I want to try to find some way where community is just expanded on these things to a place where we are bringing in the older generations more, listening to them, and hopefully changing for the better based off of what a lot of them say. Because, like I said at the beginning, I feel bad saying the word predator for a lot of them, because so many of them grew up in times where they were forced to become these people unwillingly. Like, whether it's good or bad and they do bad things. Maybe I'm just a very unpopular opinion, but for some of them, you can see and feel the pain in behind their eyes when they're like either remembering about things or now they feel horrible that they've like done things. Um, so it's one of those things where it's like we need the perspectives. You can't expect to go somewhere if we're not willing to change, and we're not going to get that change listening to straight white women write about two hockey players falling in love and having sex.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And I appreciate you mentioning that, like the twink death. I laughed really hard. I never heard that before. How that affects your self-esteem and like how you kind of almost realize you're a different person than you were in your 20s, and like how that affects your body image, especially with the standards that are out there, not just white Western beauty standards, but also the ways that the gay community holds certain body standards, and trans community and so on and so forth.
It irks me, and I'll use that show as an example. So hopefully no one is like a. But I'm like, so if I look at another popular show that was out, Boots. Yes, okay, it was in the army or the what was that? What's that one group of the army? Air Force? No. Marines. That's what it was, Marines. So of course you're gonna have like your muscular ones, but like the protagonist was a late stage twink. Let's call it like it is. Like there was some of the bodies in there were just normal, which was perfect because I was like, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for showing that like someone can have a normal body and like exist without having to feel like you fit into one of these sides of like stick thin or like super muscular. Written by a gay person. Cancelled. Which I won't delve too far into, but I was like, I mean, the ending note kind of didn't sit well with me either, like the message that it was saying. So I was like, I'm okay with this. But you go across the spectrum to this hockey win, and it's like two guys, pretty much ripped, like phenomenal. Okay, cool. This is how it is. Instantly talked about everywhere, renewed. Like it's like the biggest thing. People are like, oh my God, did you see? Like, this is so good for representation. They're carrying the torch at the Olympics for certain events. And I was like, no, though. Do you? I respect people's privacy and I respect not wanting to have to say what your sexuality is. Like we talked about earlier, it would be lovely if we were in a place of I don't have to say it, I don't have to come out. That is not the case. When people are attacking the queer community left, right, and center, I'm gonna need you to be vocal. Because if you're not, you're basically just showing again to all these future generations that it's okay to play the game and it's okay to like do this if it gets you that little bit further. So I'm like, no, from all that I see so right now is just two straight guys who got to unrealistically look what gay life is like, and now they're being celebrated for it, and they're the ones that get to do this. Well, why couldn't like hire someone gay to do it then? Let's see them go and do a torch. That is representation. Hire someone. I'm sorry, I've seen the hockey games. Not all of them are ripped. I do not care what you say. There are people that do not have this like quintessential body. Cast one of them. There is no need for this, and I think it does damage it, and I get it. It's sensational and it's like salacious and ooh, it's so fun to watch. But like at the end of the day, it really does nothing for us, for our rights, for anything. And you can say it's visibility and it's representation, but until it is out of people's mouths, until we start treating the teller of the story like they know what they're doing, then it's not representation. It's more packaging. It's more layers for us to have to rip through.
Well said. I think it's important that people really take a critical look at the media they're representing and asking themselves, what is it that this is communicating? So
Mhm.
I do appreciate it. I think some people just aren't willing to say their opinions, like the things that need to be said, because they're afraid of the pushback. And so that's how things go along for so long.
Mhm.
And this podcast is a place for hard truths and a reality check. So
I think it's interesting too that I would say it highlights almost, and I don't want to come across as like this ungrateful, well, why wasn't I picked to be this? But like getting this book published was a journey. Like no publishing house would touch me. The ones that all claimed that they're interested in telling queer stories from queer voices authentically, not a single one even reached out and said, thank you, like, but no thank you, which I get. They receive bazillions of manuscripts, a lot of them probably written by AI now because people are like, oh, let me just check this in. Um, but all these champions, so the gatekeeping that is going on with our stories, where again, not to harp on the same show, but this straight white woman can write a story about the community and all of a sudden it takes off. So there is this level of gatekeeping of our own community and our own stories that are like, again, we're not doing ourselves any favors. It may feel comfortable, it may feel nostalgic to be wrapped in like these stereotypes, but at the end of the day, it's just going to make things worse.
It's a really great point.
So we want to talk about self erasure. So it's like people spend their whole lives already erasing themselves, and then they finally get the opportunity, theoretically, to say, here's my story, here's the truth. And then again, people are like, could you change that? I don't really like that you said that. It's like, okay, I didn't like living it.
That's
But it
exactly it.
happened.
Like, if kids can live it, why can't kids learn about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And why we want to stop that. We don't want to go back that way. We don't want to like repeat these things. Kids, for the most part nowadays, are a lot more socially conscious. And the fact that they're like, let me learn about these things so we don't repeat it.
Yeah. Education is power, right?
Should be.
Yeah.
When it's used correctly.
It's a great point. So if you were to say what you would hope that the reader of your book take away from it, what would you hope they take away?
I hope that they take away to forgive themselves. Because I think a lot of us carry around it's gonna get emotional for a second. Um, I think a lot of us carry around a certain amount of weight of I wish I could have done differently. I wish I could have been better in this. I wish I could have stood up for myself. I wish I could have defended myself. I wish I didn't put too much effort into X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of the times we'll excuse what other people do, but we won't excuse what we do. We hold ourselves to this weird standard, this weird, like, this person's allowed to make a mistake, but we're not. And especially for those of us who grew up in a time when there was, again, no guide, no guardrails, we take a lot of what we went through as needing to define us. And I think I'm hoping that some people will recognize in themselves maybe something that they thought, okay, yes, I did go out and partied a lot and I was crazy and I drank and I did, like, I went out and slept with these people and I did this. And I want them to realize in themselves, like, I wasn't bad. I was a product A of my environment, but I was surviving. So while the survival strategy wasn't necessarily the best or the most healthy, I did what I had to take, and giving yourself a little bit of leeway in that regard. So I think that would go above and beyond. So I don't know if I used the correct words there or if I sounded really like off, but I'm like, I just want people to forgive themselves. And then the second takeaway is I really want people to just start looking at things from a different perspective. Like, we cannot keep looking at things through the same lens of all these stereotypes that are handed down to us, or these social media wars going on between sides and labeling people specific ways. Like, I really want people to become cognizant of how they're showing up in their own lives and not even worrying about all the noise, because we can't. I know it sounds rich and people are going to be like, you saying we can't control things, so don't worry about them? Nice try. But theoretically, yes, we should be focusing on ourselves and how we show up in the world, because we ain't fixing anything until we fix what's in each of us. So I'm really hoping that it might change perspective a little bit. As much fun as it is to put ourselves into these AI machines and see these pictures that it spits out, we're never going to be that. So let's get real comfortable with being messy.
I love that. I appreciate you being so courageous, not just today with me and like reaching out to get your story out on Rainbow Country, but also your book and your story there. And it does take a lot of courage to not just live a life that we've lived, but to also be willing to put it out there and be open to the critique and how it could affect our lives. But I just want you to know that I know just from my small corner of the world, that sharing your story even a little bit changes lives. So I thank you for that. The future thanks you.
I'm Colin Belcourt, the author of The Blue Hour Gospel. I partnered with this amazing digital artist and graphic designer, Brian Futter from Toronto, and he's worked so hard on elevating my little words. And it is going to be available in both e-format and physical copy. It will be available in all major retailers online. It's going to be print on demand, so you can either pick up that copy or the e-one. And of course, I will be sharing it on all of my profiles and hard coding the link into everything. So there's zero way that anyone's going to miss it. I am on Blue Sky as Colin is writing, and I am of course on LinkedIn as my name, Colin Belcourt, just plain and simple.
Well, thank you so much, Colin. Again, I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing it in a book form. And I'm really, honestly, really excited to read it. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the story. They aren't really meant to wrap up neatly, because queer life doesn't always come with closure. But it does come with truth, with courage, and with the refusal to be erased. If what you heard today stayed with you, let it move you. Let it change how you see this place we call Canada, not as it claims to be, but as it is. Whether you're out, in, visible, healing, hurting, or just holding on, you belong. You're not broken, and you are not alone, and you do not need permission to take up space. We'll be back soon with more voices from the cracks, where queerness lives, breathes, and builds something new. Until then, remember who you are. Remember that you're not going anywhere. This is Rainbow Country. And to those who shared their stories, thank you. You trusted us with your truth, and we carry it carefully.